Good evening. This will serve as the official assessment of the figure drawing submitted by Onessa, and I'll share my thoughts on what you would have presented, and I need you to take notes to make the necessary corrections. I think one of the first things that I must commend you in doing is sending the different stages of the drawing, and I'm looking at it. I think it was done from a photograph. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I can see you instituting your guidelines in the first stage there. But again, as I would have said prior in the prior session when I looked at the value scale, the quality of the photographs you're taking, you need to pay keen attention to that because this looked like just poor lighting. And if you intend for me to see those guidelines clearly, and it is important for me to see how you're utilizing your guidelines, it's often good to ensure that you're in an area where there's proper light because as you can see when we go out there, we're not seeing much in terms of what's on the paper. Similarly, it seems you have some shadow, some cast shadow on the paper there. Just pay some extra attention to where you're taking your photograph and how you're taking it out, especially when you're submitting work for assessment, because it's going to have some bearings on what is done. And you can clearly see again here the lighting was poor, and then you have some shadow happening there. Sometimes it's just good to just come outside and do it outdoors rather than trying to do it indoors. You might get a better shot and a better quality photograph. Here again, I'm seeing the shadow there, so you're gonna have to learn to pay some keen attention to that. And as I look at your initial construction line and guidelines, immediately, because this is something that I would have seen in the piece that is a little more detailed, I was looking at what is happening with the around the shoulder area, especially with the clavicle on this side. And already I'm seeing where the problem is coming from, because if you were to construct that, and that's one of the things that I often advise when you're working during the construction and composition phase, that everything that you do, you lay that foundation down to ensure that it's visible. So you draw in a transparent manner. And even though you're working from a photograph, I will still encourage you to do that, because what it does, it's going to develop that habit of ensuring that you analyze things properly. Because as you can see here, there's some faults right here. And that is because if you were to take this clavicle over there and then you take this one back there, I think it's going to be more out here. Even though the arms are, the hands is back, I think it's going to be more out here rather than that close. So sometimes when you're working from photograph, you still have to assess what is going on, because something looks funny here from just looking at it. And when you look at the head as well, and I'm assuming because the head is thrown back, that's the chin and under the neck that is showing there, that is something that you also need to pay attention. And you're going to see what is going to happen later on when we come to the other stage that you would have submitted. Here again, see the quality of the photograph here is it's a bit poor. I would have asked on the stream, if you would have used the value scale as a guide in terms of, okay, how many values you're going to have in this drawing. Are you going to have 3? Are you going to have 4? Are you going to have 5? Are you going to have 6? And did you actually plan that out? Because that's something that you need to get into the habit of doing, so that when you start shading, you know what value goes where. And by planning, it's going to make your shading more effective. And we're going to see some of the issues that you're having as a result of that in the final stage. Something looked wrong with this the construction of this thigh muscle right there. I think that was corrected in the final piece if I can recall, but we're going to get there soon, so we're going to know soon. So this is one, and I'm thinking this one is the second to last stage, because looking at the details on it, it seems so. So we're going to focus on the final one that you would have submitted. Now, when you look at it, the drawing itself, it strikes you as being a very good piece of drawing. But when you start digging a little deeper, then is when you start to see some of the issues, and that's what I want you to pay attention to as I discuss some of those things that are, in my opinion, areas that you need to work on and you need to sort out. Now I don't know when you use the photograph, what you would have done if you would have actually zoomed in on different areas to ensure that you get a good look at what is going on. But if you whenever you're working from photograph, that's one way of approaching it. When you start zooming in, you get to see hidden details that you will not necessarily pick up with your naked eyes. And whenever you're doing that, whenever you're working in those specific areas, it's always good to zoom in so you get a clearer appreciation and view of what is happening in terms of detail. There are a couple of things that I am looking at in this piece that I think you need to address. One, when I look at the way you treat the chair or the table or whatever it is that the model is sitting on, it seems to be like an afterthought. And if you are going to continue to improve in your drawing, these are things you need to take a little more seriously. Now, you don't have to go in full detail, but at least in your construction, because look what is happening here. You see that line? Now that seem, I don't think there's no way that chair or stool or whatever it is she's sitting on is going to be able to take that pressure with this happening there. So those are the little things you have to pay attention to. And then when you look at this here at the back, the part where her hands is resting, it suggests that it's a different, again, stool or whatever it is that she's resting on. It's totally different. And even though it's in the background, and I'm assuming that you would have used the light lines to show that, you still need to pay attention to those legs. I don't know if that's how it is in the photograph that you would have used as reference, but to me, I don't think so. It would be that way. But you gotta pay attention to little things like that because you don't want to get into the habit of treating things as unimportant because they stand out in the final drawing. And even though this drawing is not fully completed from what you would have submitted, and I'm assuming you would have submitted, you're almost to the concluding stage, so I'm going to assess what is in front of me. You need to pay attention to those things. The other thing that I want to pay attention to is what is happening with some of the areas in terms of structure. Because she's sitting on a surface, I don't think the glute, when the pressure of sitting affects the glute, you're not going to have this straight line here. That's not going to be possible. I could be wrong, but something's going to be happening at least a little more down here where this muscle is going to be bulging out a little bit more, and you should have some more curves. Now I could be wrong because the picture that you're using might actually have it looking like that, but to me, when you look at it how she's sitting, there should be some amount of change in this area in terms of the muscles. Okay, and like I was saying in your sketch, that extreme curve there on the thighs, it doesn't look natural either. So that is something you're gonna have to go back and double check. Okay, and as I would have discussed before, if we continue this clavicle and the shading, what shading would do, it would emphasize some of those flaws. You can clearly see that's disappearing. There's no way that that will be your left shoulders. I don't think it's going to disappear that swiftly, even though our head is thrown back. Because remember now, the neck is between the two clavicles, not clavicles, the two collarbones, right? And if you would have done due diligence in terms of constructing the entire area, even though you might not have been seeing all of it, then you would have seen exactly where that problem was showing its head. Because if you look here, it seems to be suggesting that that's the shoulder. But what happened with all of that? See what I mean? So this collarbone here would have been showing somewhere here, and I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing shoulders. So you definitely need to go back to that reference that you would have used and double check that. In terms of your shading, the reason why I would have asked about the values that you would have used is because by and large we could count 1, 2, 3, I'll probably say 4 different values, and the way you use them, they aren't effective enough in bringing out the three-dimensionality of the figure in the areas where you would have done it. I'm not going to look at those unfinished areas. I'm looking at the areas where you would have you would have shaded. And if we look at this tie, for example, on the right leg, it seems more flat rather than three-dimensional in terms of the top of the ties, then you have the side of the ties. And if you would have paid attention to your shading and the way you would have used your values, then that would have been a whole lot more three-dimensional, or it could be a whole lot more three-dimensional. Because when you come from here, which is suggesting that this is the highest point in the form of the leg, and you start to descend from there, you're going to start coming around before you come down to the side. But we don't get that impression when we look at the way you shade. And it's the same thing here. It's almost like this entire thing just go right through here. But this is where your leg bone is going to connect to the hip bone. And somewhere along here, something starts to change to facilitate the glutes that is going to come around there. And when I look at how you would have shaded, I'm not getting that impression. Also, as you come lower to the surface, remember now, this is not flat. This is going to curve and it's going to go underneath before it reaches that section of the leg that touches. And therefore, you should have some tones here that are a little darker. And in some cases, you should have some amount of reflective light occurring there too. Right? So you need to look at those things. And when we look at the side here too, it's the same thing that's happening for the rib. It's almost like the rib just go all the way up. But then when you look at the rib cage, it always comes around like that. But because of how you would have shaded it, you're not getting that sense that you can really hold her properly from around that area. And if you look at the three-dimensionality in this breast, and then you look at this one, it's almost like you didn't give it the kind of respect that is necessary to make it feel that you can actually touch it and you can actually feel that solid form that is matching what it's saying here. Because if you were saying here that this breast is up like that, then why is this one looking so flat rather than much more solid in terms of the way it's shaped? Because this seems to be the breast of a young lady from looking at it. And if you have this amount of firmness here, it should be showing here with the way you treat it in terms of your shading. And when you look at what is happening from when you come from the nipple and you start to descend, you're having some of the same issues that you're having here on the leg. Because remember, this is a spherical form. And because it's spherical, it's going to either gradually disappear from the light to the dark or vice versa. And you need to pay attention to those things. And when you're working from photograph, you still got to remember that in some cases, depending on the light and how the photograph was taken and if there was any editing done to the photograph, some things you're going to have to still pay attention to. Because at the end of the day, we'll be looking at your drawing and not the photograph of the drawing. And therefore, your drawing should speak to what you would have seen in the photograph in the most effective way. Okay? When we look at the hands as well, the way you would have shaded it, it's not 3D enough. We can look at the hair in the same way too. It's just you just slap some tones there of light and dark. But is it speaking to the texture of the hair as opposed to the difference between the texture of the hair as compared to the skin? Those are things that you have to pay attention to. And even though you're working from a photograph, they're still important because what you're doing, you're getting yourself into the habit of doing things the correct way. Because from the time you start to take for granted these important things, the quality of your drawing is going to suffer. And as good as it looks, because when you look at it from like that, it really looks like a good drawing. You can see light and dark, you can see the cast shadow, you can see the form shadow, you can see your highlighted areas. But when you start to go in detail and you start to break it down, that's where you start seeing some of the issues that I'm highlighting here for you at the moment. Now what I like, some of the things that I like that you would have done is the way you would have used your contour lines here to have to emphasize certain things. That was beautifully done. And also I like the way you would have put together your composition, a nice diagonal movement there. And if we drop that down, a dividing line down this way, you get a good sense of the dynamics of the composition. So it's an interesting composition. But having gone through all of that to produce such an interesting composition, and to me the pose is so dynamic that if you're taking some more time to address some of those issues I mean, you will really have a strong drawing. And because from my assessment, it doesn't seem like it's complete, and because it's a small drawing, and one of the reasons why I'm assessing it like this, because it's small, and I think within the time slot that you had, you could have completed it a little bit more, or you could have done some more with those areas that you would have just left a little bit to. And that's when we zoom out here, you can clearly see here. This here would have been more of a reflective light, and if there's a reflective light here, then you can have a dark happening somewhere around here, and that would have done so much more to create that volume for the side of the figure that you could have done. And then if you look at that, it's gonna wend it away all the way here, and all of that is gonna come around here. It might start breaking up in a little in some ways, but it will come there. And when we look at the way you would have treated the calf or this leg, I'm seeing that you're making some attempts to show what is happening there with that shin bone because of the pressure and the contraction of the muscle there. That would have been a little more emphasized. So that's a good start. But what I would suggest is that you complete this drawing, making a note of some of the things that I would have discussed, and giving some more care and attention to those things that you just seem to be rushing over. You don't have to make everything important. The figure is the important thing, but if you're going to use the chairs or you're going to put things in position there, you're going to have to treat them with a little more respect for them to really add to the environment and the conversation. And you need to remember that. And if she's sitting in an environment, what is going on? Is it the room? Is it the outdoor situation? You got to give us some indication. It doesn't have to be detailed, but at least give us some indication for us to know what's going on. Because you would have gone as far as creating that impression that you want to create that environment in which she's existing. And so you need to pay attention to that. And you need to put some more effort into that, please. So what I would suggest overall is it's not a bad drawing, but remember you're an advanced drawing student, and there's some things there that I'm seeing you not giving the level of time and care and respect that you need to give to a drawing, and I don't want you to get into that stage where you get complacent and you gloss over these things and then they hurt the quality of your drawing in the long run. So I would say complete it. Look at some of those points that I would have listed. See if you agree. And what you can do when you're submitting the adjusted piece, you can submit the reference that you would have used so I can look and see what's going on, and then we can discuss, and I can advise you in terms of some of the things you can do when you're working from a photograph, because there's some rules when it comes to working with photograph that you need to follow. You don't have to you don't just blindly put everything that you see in a photograph. There are some things that you need to eliminate, because at the end of the day it's a drawing you're working on, and you don't want to draw a photograph of a photograph, so to speak. Okay, so I hope this would have been helpful, and it can assist you to make the corrections and improve the quality of work. So what you're going to do is that you're going to complete it, and then you're going to resubmit it, and we're going to take another look at it and see how things would have gone from there. Thank you.